It's time for your next favorite episode of the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene.
Okay, I can't do it. We were laughing beforehand, and like Jolene and I, like, okay, we got to get our shit together because we're actually talking about something that's pretty serious today. So we got the game face on, and then as soon as we pushed play and looked at each other, it just fell apart.
We got the giggle face on.
We got the giggle face on instead. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. It's the Integratedness Podcast with Jason and Jolene. I am Jason.
And I'm Jolene.
How are you, Jolene?
Don't ask me today. Don't ask me today. The topic we're talking about, I'm just like, oh my God, I can so identify with this. It doesn't matter what gender I am.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Spent. Tired of having to cancel on myself.
I hear you. My wife is very much at that point too. Like she feels like everything's getting her stuff is secondary.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not because I'm choosing to. It's literally because of life's pressures and demands and little people who just can't take care of themselves yet.
No, a few more years. Our boy is 13 and he takes care of himself pretty well.
Yeah.
Pretty well. So it's good. This episode is actually inspired by a YouTube video that would have run about a month ago, 3 weeks to a month ago by the time you're listening, from about the only YouTuber other than Mark Manson that I watch.
And he's like a Viking man from Norway.
A Viking man from Norway. Bjorn Andreas Bull-Hansen, which is the best name ever, in my opinion.
A strong name.
It's awesome. And he's an interesting guy because he is actually a novelist who writes about Vikings. He's also a power lifter.
Yeah.
But he's a former therapist.
And he's an archery guy. I looked at his little profile there and I was like, whoa, this like a jack of all trades.
He is.
Bjorn of all trades.
It's awesome. He's awesome. And I like it because he will talk about stuff which isn't out a lot in the self-help field from the male perspective. And that's why I like Mark Manson as well, with his Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast. They're about the two best, and the Daily Stoic. And I think there's a reason why like Bjorn and Mark and Ryan Holiday are becoming popular and resonating with people right now, because they're tapping into a part of something that's needed in our society, which is support for men. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of something we're talking about, because Bjorn's video was about why men are killing themselves.
Mm-hmm. Literally titled that, Why Men Kill Themselves. Yeah. So I watched it actually this morning very early because it was a hockey morning. And it was very interesting because I think I first want to preface in this episode that we are talking about men's mental health. That's a theme that Integratedness wanted to anchor in on this year. Yep. But we're not disregarding that these themes can impact many people, right? Like I myself feel like I'm under the pressure of like, you know, people's around me might be like, just get it together. You got 3 kids. You got to keep running things. You got to do this and that, right?
And that is the worst thing to say to someone.
Well, yeah, and I don't think anyone's actually saying that, but my inside voice, right, which is probably my toxic masculinity. But that concept was thrown out there around toxic masculinity. And I just think like really what that is, it's the way the patriarch has formed expectations in this world to believe that people need to behave in certain ways for their productivity and their worth and their value. And a lot of male presence here is around productivity. It's around who are we? What is my purpose? And, you know, one point that really stood out was when he said, like, we're removing men's purposes. We're saying we don't need you anymore. Mm-hmm. And I see that with that rise of femininity and more individuation in this society and how that impacts men, right? Yep. So the more empowered women became, and I am one of them in terms of like, I'm independently running my life and this and that, and don't need for in ways that perhaps women may have in the past. And just by proxy, and there's nothing wrong with this because I'm resourcing myself and to be an equal or in previous cases more in whatever ways. But, you know, we also, the minute the scale tips, we take away from the other end. And it's always this balance of polarity, especially between partnerships and genders and stuff. So that was a really big one around like how that will remove the purpose for, right? And even if you think about industrialization and mechanics and robots and removing humans from being needed for things, right? Yeah. And even just think about this, the furnace and the gas fireplace. I'm thinking about this Viking man now. Yeah. He used to go out and get wood. There was a need for the man to go get the wood to provide for warmth in the house. Well, now there's no need for that. There are these biological, like, caveman instincts within us, these primal pieces in us that duties like that would have fulfilled.
Well, that was the male's job. We were the hunter-gatherer provider. That's what we did.
Yes.
Right?
And now that looks very different in this world. And I think from a biological standpoint, The same way you guys lack that based on everything we're resourced to us, I think that women also lack their ability to caregive the way they want to. By us working or not being able, like now there's daycares or there's the need for dual income families. So we can't care for our children the way we want to. So all those things, right? Like I want to throw the opposite out there in terms of what fulfills us, right? And it was very interesting too, because he talked about, actually maybe this was something slightly different, but how, yeah, this was something else I'm going to interweave here, but how, we are kind of, women are, wired for connection during times of distress.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yeah,
and men are wired for protection in a sense. Like they are there to protect. So when things feel at danger, at risk, you're actually looking to like produce something or fix something in those ways, which then adds to the pressure of how maybe your inner world is caving in on you as well.
It could be if you feel that, and what's going on right now, I know, and between Jess and I, like she'll bring something up that's bothering her. My first instinct is to fix it. Yeah. Because I can. Or offer advice or something. But she doesn't want that. She just needs to express how she's feeling, and then it's out of her system, and then she can kind of go out. And so that does create this weird, sometimes conflict with it in our household.
Yes.
Because it's like, I can, like, well, just do this, and it's solved. Well, I know that. I'm just trying to express what I'm saying. It's like, then why did you ask me for it? Like, you know what I mean? Because I am going to do something. That's my natural default setting.
Yeah, those are big
is to take action, right?
Yeah, which then is very different when you become the burdened individual who can't quite take action, doesn't know where to start, feels overwhelmed, feels overburdened. Where do you go? Then you're almost like, I imagine, feeling like you're stuck in mud.
Well, it is very much. I find it was and it's happening right now with the asshole to the south. Because so many people get worked up about this guy and everybody's talking about him like, you can't fucking do anything. So why are you wasting your energy talking about it? Just get on with your day-to-day life. But everybody needs to talk about it.
Yeah. It's scary. I think it's the fear of how much power one can hold, that it can override what's right.
Oh, for sure.
Right? I think that's one of the innate pieces is like, we all know, like we all live by typically a moral compass, and it's like, if somebody does wrong, there's laws to protect about that, against that.
Sure.
But if the person making the laws does wrong, nothing can change that.
Exactly. And so everyone, and so scary. To feel like they can control the situation, people talk about it.
Totally.
Because if they feel like they're changing anything, even though they're not. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there.
Totally.
And the thing that he touches on a lot too, and we were talking about this beforehand, Joe, is how we were not designed to live in boxes and look at screens.
Yeah.
And have all our wants and needs catered to. And that is also contributing to this whole situation that's going on right now. People, in order to cope, are just like going on TikTok and just flipping from one reel to the next. And it's just to numb out, basically, is all that's happening.
Yeah. And he's recording this video from like in the woods, and it was funny because he like jumped down from this small little ledge, and he's like, I'm 52 and I can still jump down these ledges. And I was like, that was a rock. But it was really cute. But I liked that. Like I said to Jason, I was like, I want to be a previous therapist and just spend my days walking through the woods, right? One day. But it's that piece, right? Like the need to ground, the need to reconnect, the need to be away and out of our heads in these other ways. Like we know that is impacting everybody, okay? Like gender, race, whatever, it doesn't matter. That is across the board. But I think ways that men are disempowered in today's society are through things that are consuming their mental capacity and stealing their discipline. And their discipline is what's going to keep them driven to their purpose. Okay. So by stealing that, we disempower them. We put them all in the Tiger King world. We create very passive, non-directed men, which is essentially removing their balls. Like it is a huge piece of your masculinity. So, by surfing porn, that's one of them. I think the sports epidemic of fantasy footballs and more sports and more need to watch this and this and this. Like, it's one thing to be a supporter of it, but it's another to get off the fucking couch and move your own body. You
should be playing the sports instead of just spending all day watching them. Like you can do both.
I think you can do both, but I also think that we trick our brains into thinking we're participating in something when we are participating passively from the couch. Yeah. Right?
Oh,
and it brings,
huge.
and especially if you've played the previous sport, this is just so common, right? Yeah. Like, no, go move your body and then watch the sport, or find a delicate balance between all that, because you're almost tricking your body into thinking you're doing it, right? right?
Yeah.
Like there's a mind, body, muscle memory there. But these are the things within the box that can really steal focus, discipline, and awareness from men, right? I do think that those are big pieces. I think drugs and alcohol are huge stealers of masculinity. The minute a man loses control of himself through intoxication, you've lost one of your key components of masculinity, which is the ability to provide safety, security, and stability.
Yeah, if you're like drunk on the
Yeah.
couch or stoned out of your mind,
Absolutely.
you're not functioning in the way you're designed to function.
Absolutely. And I think one of the greatest attributes of a man could be to enjoy perhaps some alcoholic beverages or you know, some substances if they wish, if they want, but really never lose control. That's a big piece. And there are people who will intentionally have a glass of wine or a couple drinks but never lose control. Yet we glamorize these tailgate parties or these locker room, you know, whatever team events or whatever it is around, like shooting the shit, going to the pub with the guys. And really all we're doing is glamorizing and normalizing losing your masculinity.
And it's been designed that way. Like the advertisements are all about that.
Is.
It's showing dudes hanging out, partying, and there's women around it scantily clad in bikinis. And look at this, you're a real man if you drink Bud Light, you know, like and do this. But you're not. Like it's sort of a fake. Men, both genders, are being sold an identity which is complete and utter bullshit.
Yeah. And for women, it's the beauty, it's the body. It's you know, really, really demoralizing aging, right? Like our lips aren't big enough, our cheeks aren't big enough, our asses aren't big enough now, but we're supposed to be skinny, but we're supposed to eat all the right things, and we're supposed to show up as these sensual creatures. And it's like, well, fuck, you're teaching me to be so disconnected from what body I do have. How do I show up in my femininity? So like we are destroying each of the genders to disempower. I think it's a massive divide and conquer in this state of being, you know?
Within the last few years especially, it feels like it's gotten
I think we've
way
dealt with
it's
it
always
for decades.
been since I'd say the 50s really or 40s, but it's gotten progressively worse.
I agree.
And more intense.
I could look back to the 50s and I mean, you would see a man having a glass of scotch with a cigar.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't see them all hooting and hollering and wearing fucking face paint and dummy hats.
I know, right?
Oh, like it's really bizarre. Back then, that would have been a disgrace to being a gentleman.
Yeah, you were at least wearing a suit where you had your cigar and you were drinking your scotch and you were in a gentleman's
there was
club.
none of this loss of control.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big piece. Where are we losing control of ourselves? And those are big places, right? So it's just, I say this without judgment, right? It's an observation, and it is things that, you know, when you get to where we are now, like you can look back in your 20s and be like, yeah. And it's funny that that's initially what we're kind of drawn or attracted to or this or that or see as the big end all be all. But like, I so appreciate having a partner who does not really give a shit about alcohol at all, you know, appreciates a fine wine from time to time, but there is this huge lack of safety, security, and being in control that I love, that I've never experienced before, because that wasn't anything I had experienced before, right? So there's big pieces like that, and you know, you enjoy your cigar and your scotch, but you're not out there drinking a case of beer with your buddy in the backyard.
No, I think
there's a difference between the intention around it, right?
And mine's a end of day relax. It's my time.
I think there's a lot of introspection, and you're also very particular about it. You don't just grab whatever because you need booze. You taste your liquor. You'll buy a different kind, or you'll buy a different kind of cigar. You know, like it's a ritual of a different sense. Yeah. And I think there's a sophistication to that, right? So I'm not justifying or not justifying some versus the other, right? But it is a point of awareness, right? And I think as we age, we grow out of a lot of these stages. We should,
sure. but the portrayal of men right now is you never do, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at what's glamorized. You look at all of these things, right? I also think there's a bigger push around sobriety and things like that. Those are things that can really just kind of keep men in the black hole if they are there, right? One of the big things that video brought up too is, you know, when men reach out, they're just told to figure it out, to get it together. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on that? Like, how did that stand out to you?
Oh, very true. Very, very true. It's funny too, like a friend of mine, Kenton, who I do another podcast with, he and I got talking about this one day, is that men are being told right now by a lot of women, you need to express yourself more and express your feelings. But from his experience, and I found this a lot myself, As soon as we do, the women shut us down because they don't want to hear it. Not my wife, like, you know what I mean? Yep. But I'm just saying in general.
That can be a common experience.
So it sends a mixed message. Well, which one do you want then?
Totally.
And then when there's a super sensitive guy, the women or society's like, well, what happened to all the traditional tough guy men? What do you want? Because that's sending a very confusing signal out there.
Yeah, and I think that those are sacred places to get to. And I think that if a man is going to access his emotion, there's got to be a bit of a sacred place for that. Yeah. And that's where trust in partnership and earning that with each other is a part that will advance. I don't think that's something that should be offered up out of the gates with anybody. And I say that about my own femininity. When I'm in like a softness of my femininity, the world doesn't get that. Like Kevin will get that. And I'm very, very aware that he's probably one of the only people in my life that will get that because of the container he creates. But there's a shitload of times that he doesn't get that. And that is frustrating for both of us because of the way the rest of my life hardens me.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
Totally. I'm laughing because that's like the fucking state I'm in right now. And I feel really bad about that. But I think when we look at this, men opening up or this or that, this reminds me back of that thing I saw around men's nervous systems were not built for love. Women's were. Mm-hmm. Women's were built for love. So we naturally at a place of distress will go for connection. And this is where Jess will express how she's feeling just to feel validated, heard, and seen. Yep. We will go for connection. Men's nervous systems are not wired for connection and love. They are wired for protection, action, that kind of thing, safety, security. So if something comes up in you that is an emotional kind of triggering or activation, your instinct will be to withdraw and protect.
For myself, I know, like, work through it in my head.
From a nervous system perspective, though, that wasn't your first response. That's what you've learned to do with your healing and your awareness over time. Yeah. But at a primal response level, you're meant to protect. So that's where couples actively come together and get to the point that you're talking about right now, where you will self-reflect and then lean in. So that's a dynamic between a lot of couples that'll be like, oh, that's why when I lean in and my partner kind of just like, it's not because they don't love or want to hear you, but they're also trying to fix it. They're also protecting because they're like scanning, ooh, my nervous system's saying, something's not safe here. Yeah. There's feeling something's wrong. And then you're instantly going to go and protect and probably provide in some way, right? Rather than soften into that. And that's an entire new state of a relationship. And I notice most people will get there in healthy relationships after about like 6 to 8 months of the woman like really being seen and supported by the man. Then he will start to unfold and they'll start to kind of swap the relational dynamics to his turn now, essentially. Yeah. And I think that is key. I think in a genuine sense, it would be really hard for it to go the other way around, just based on how one key unlocks the other in a sense, right? But those are pieces that I do think is really hard for men in society right now of like, try and just figure it out. And again, like, what are the ways that men are gathering? Well, they're gathering with a bunch of buddies at a pub, or they're gathering on a sports team. And that's why I love when quite a few of my clients are in healthy places. And I'm like, you need to start speaking that amongst your group. You need to be the guy that's brave enough to talk about your journey. Why are you sober? Right? Well, yeah, because I made shit decisions. I was tired of spending my money. I was tired of being out of control. Like, share that. You're not judging other people, but you're giving them an opportunity to see what they're probably already feeling and already aware of, but that there is a possibility that it could be different. You talking about your counseling journey, right? Yeah. So many different things. You talking about the aftermath of your reporting job, right?
Oh, big time. And those were hard things to do. I remember the first time I talked about counseling and depression, I wrote a column in the paper. And I didn't tell anyone I was writing it. So I remember when the editor would look, and you could see the look on their face, and they got up and they walked into like the main editor's office to say, this is what's coming. And then the editor talked to me, and he was really good. Robert Koopmans, he's like, you sure you want to do this? Because it'll create ripples in a good way. And you don't know what people will say back. You don't know how people respond. But I got generally a pretty favorable review out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And from the public and from things like that. But that was not an easy step to make.
No.
But it's like after however many years of struggling, it's like, I can't not do this anymore.
Yeah, it starts to become very much, you can see how your life has rolled out as that's a big part of your purpose, right? Like that like people will be trailblazers in that, you know, and when we think about all these things, people, their brains, they'll go to like Robin Williams, right?
Oh, and that Robin Williams happened many years after I wrote that piece, right? But I think that's something that people that in the last 10 years, men have started to feel more comfortable about. Not all of them, but as a general, like they're talking more about their mental health or things that haven't worked. It's slowly coming. The fact that someone like Bjorn Andreas Bull-Hansen will put a video out about that.
Totally.
Says a lot about where we're getting.
And he is a very masculine man, right? Yeah. But he's also very attuned and aware of himself and dynamics and, you know, yeah, it's interesting because I asked Jason when this episode was going to be launching, and what did we say, March 12th?
12th, yeah.
Yeah, so March 11th was my dad's birthday.
Oh,
and
wow.
This, of course, is resonating so much there because, you know, it's interesting because in his video, he talked about how most of the time, by the time men reach out, like they've already tried to problem solve this on their own. And I do believe that for many people too, right? But essentially for men, like if you've got, and this is like the flat across rule for doctors, I think if you have a man coming in reporting a health concern, fucking get on it because men do not willingly go to the doctor. No. This is like, this is a stereotype that is there because it's true, right? Like there's no time, there's less importance for it in their own mind of what needs to get dealt with. So if you have a man walking in your door asking for help, take that shit seriously, you know? And that reminds me of the day that, you know, my dad had come home and said he had been to the doctor, said he was suicidal at work, had a plan, like, you know, and was essentially sent home that day. And fair enough. I don't have any flaws in the system there because I also don't think an admission would have been something that would have helped in that moment. No. But you never know, right? Like the reality is it would have been better than fucking sending him home because we know what the result of that was, right?
Well, that happened to Angela Iacobucci as well.
Yeah.
Right?
So
like,
again, you start to look at some of those things and, you know, working in that system for so long, I saw the people who had the interventions, but then eventually found their own way without the intervention. But I do think if you can deter someone or delay it as long as possible, potentially there's room for, you know, there's room for someone to see that glimmer of hope differently or maybe break through a different side. I also am very aware of people's self-determination. I just like that option to be the last one possible.
For
right?
sure, absolutely.
And I don't think for many of these people, there's a lot of there's other options in front of this, right? Yeah. I think that, you know, when you look at the bombarded mind and the multiple stressors that, you know, in this case, we're talking about men might suffer from, the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel under maybe a financial pressure, maybe an addiction pressure, maybe a physical pain pressure, right? All of these things that people are suffering from. It's really hard to reach for that other one.
Big time.
Yeah.
It's really, it feels so overwhelming. It's like being in quicksand.
Totally.
Is what it feels like.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's funny that you say that because I went to a medium. She was actually a shaman healer years after my dad died. And in one of the journeys where we connected with him, that was exactly what he said walking through life was like going through like neck deep quicksand. Yeah. But he had a lot of physical pains.
Which will just compound,
he had a stroke when he was younger. Lots of different things. So there was a lot of expectations of the man that he struggled to meet in society based on physical disability, all sorts of things, right? Even though he was functioning at what an average non-affected male was supposed to function at, right?
But again, there's like that pressure or that image that's portrayed that you should be acting like.
Totally.
Right? Which just makes things worse.
Yeah. And then you just take that, you know, nowadays... Holy fuck, the struggle nowadays for each gender, right? The comparison of moms and the Pinterest birthdays and the this and the that. You know, luckily my mom didn't have that. She had a telephone in the wall. There was no cell phone that she followed around with. And life, I think, was simpler in those ways, but harder because there was isolation, you know?
But we've created a new form of isolation because everyone's relying on the phone and the computer and the internet to connect when that's not real connection at all.
Exactly. They think that's connection, right?
It's not. I mean, it's that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you can have multiple people, you know, I talk about this a lot. Like I have so many people on my friends list on social media and connections and things like that. But like if I had a flat tire, I don't actually know who I would call. Like I don't have someone in my life regularly all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't, even like family wise, I don't really have a big family. And we're, you know, of course my mom and Rick are quite close and stuff, but you know, it's interesting when you actually look at the tangible physical people in your life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you have that you can call on when shit gets real, right?
Yeah, usually it's a 1-800 number that comes and saves you, and you don't know the person and you'll never see them again. Right?
Yeah, which can be okay too.
Yeah, luckily for me, it's Mario's Towing.
Right, there you go.
But yeah, so thinking about some of those things as well in terms of what isolation looks like. And I do think that there's a lot of pro-social things that men can do for their mental health. So let's maybe focus on a little bit of that. One of the things he was doing in that video, which again, I don't think we do enough of, is get the fuck outside.
Oh, big
Get
time.
outside, get connected. This is why when men fish and when they hunt, I'm like, you know what, ladies, find a way to help them keep that healthy connection, you know, as long as they're not getting shit-faced and running away from life. But that is their form of meditation. Maybe that's their form of your yoga class or whatever it is, your book club with your girlfriends.
Don't demean it and say that it's toxic or that it's, because that's but that is being portrayed now, right?
Well,
that's the thing.
So you think you can go out for a 4-day hunting trip and
give me a break.
You know, they are really, if that's his only way, let's say he's got like an office job or he's, you know, grabbed by the balls working for the man 9 to 5 or whatever. Let that hunting trip be his connection to his primal drive of providing for the family.
Because that's what it is coming from.
Bringing the deer home, bringing the moose home, connecting. Like, you want that man to come home connected and grounded when he is paying so much attention to the world around him. Like, he doesn't hear you ask him to like move his boots at the front door, but he can hear that moose from like a kilometer away, right?
Yeah, there's a reason why.
Exactly. And you want him to have that space to attune to self and gain his own connection. I think fishing is a big one for men. A lot of my clients fish and hunt.
Yep.
And I talk to them about how that could be their form of meditation. That's their form of grounding. And how do you mimic that in your day-to-day, in your 9 to 5? Because once or twice a year isn't enough, or during certain seasons isn't enough. How do you ground? Because they're getting the grounding properties of being in nature, being with the trees, being under vitamin D, right?
I think that's when, if you can get out even just and hike, like I'll do that about once a week. I'll go on a hike. It's only for an hour, but that once a week, that hour is amazing.
It is. Yeah. If you can find any kind of way, like I tell people, get a dog to force you to get out every day or whatever that be. I miss not having my dog for that reason, because it gave us that reason for a 20-minute walk every day.
Yep,
right?
guaranteed, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, that's one of the ways.
Exercise is huge. My boot camp twice a week, man. Those are like some of the best hours of my week is boot camp.
Totally.
Working
So
my
for
ass
some
off.
men, it's their beer league hockey, or other men, it could be soccer or whatever, right?
Weight training.
Yeah, totally.
Yoga even.
Guys,
it's good for you too.
It could be independent or it could be team related. And I think there's a benefit to that pack mentality too.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So some of those kinds of things, even if you're getting out coaching your kids' teams, right?
Yep.
Those things, you're getting out and you're still moving, you have purpose, you have that connection to those things as well. I think that diet, nutrition are really important, starting to pay attention to gut health and protein intake and hormone health and a lot of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I also think, you know, sleep, prioritizing sleep. Oh, sorry, that's my sick children from my house calling me. Ignore that, guys. We're almost done here. But looking at some of those things as well. And then I think, you know, healthy connection and sense of belonging somewhere in community. And you can get that in some of those places, maybe even in your workplace, right?
Yeah.
Those can create healthy mental health, right? And ways to connect to self, right? Whether it be journaling. Actually, quite a few of my male clients will do voice journals. They don't want to write.
Yeah, you can audio record, right?
They
if
audio
you don't
record,
feel like
or
writing.
they make like a little YouTube video. And I'm like, that's genius.
It is good.
Yeah.
No, I think anything, like I've journaled every day for 30 years almost, right?
Yeah.
And it at the end usually of every day, like not right before, but like at the point, like after when my time starts, that's how I start it, because it unloads everything that's been on my head.
Yes.
And it makes a huge difference, because quite often, if you're not comfortable talking to someone, you still put that shit down somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you just close the book and you don't ever have to look at it again. Or if you want to reflect, you can. I think that's super important. Audio works great. Yeah, video,
but
anything.
Acknowledgement. It's about that place of acknowledging and validating and seeing and hearing yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because that is a big piece of like that silent suffering, right?
Yeah, it's better than going and putting up a Facebook post
I don't
about
think
like
men
feeling like shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I'm so mad right now and blah, blah, blah.
And I don't think
like,
that's as much a men thing as it is a passive aggressive female thing.
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
is. Totally.
So it's like, where does that come out? Sometimes it's self-destructive behavior.
Or
right?
wanting
it's
attention.
Nicotine addictions. Yeah. It's drugs and alcohol. It is sometimes eating, right?
Yep.
We will eat. And a lot of men will say, like, I used to be, able to work this off and now I can't. And there's other ways that you're detrimental with your body and just internalize it. I think way more men internalize it until it, boom, externalizes,
it
right?
becomes a huge problem.
It's a sense of implosion for sure. So I would say that those are probably pieces of healthy mental health and telling your story. I think there's more and more men that are willing. Whoa, I touched your keyboard.
Good. It's not dead yet.
Keyboard. I touched the keyboard, guys. But I think that more and more men are starting to talk about their journeys. And there's just a huge importance of it. And I do think both genders in general, right? But we have a very false world out there. And now you don't even know what's real. Like fucking AI is crazy.
Oh, don't get started on AI.
I have no idea what's real and what's not real. And that's the other thing is now our entire sense of mental clarity, our perception of what's real in this world around us is so skewed.
Oh,
it's so skewed.
They'll, like, for the rare moments when I do go on like Facebook, they'll be like, Robert De Niro said this about this. And it's like, but did he? Because I don't know. Did they put that? Did you go into Chat GPT and say, what would Robert De Niro say about this? And that's what it spewed out.
Right.
You can't trust it anymore. Like, you can't, if it's online, you can't trust it.
Yeah.
That's if it's on social media, you can't believe it.
Yeah. And even Kevin said something. He was like, hey, when's Tupac's birthday? And I was like, oh, I don't quite remember. So I looked it up and it's June 16th. But anyways, he had something come up on his thing and it was like this AI generation of this older version of Tupac saying, I would have been so many years old on this day. And it was for yesterday. And I was like, wow. He's like, now I don't believe anything. Like, how do I even, right? Like, not accurate, not the same date. It was February 19th is what the day was. Yeah. June 16th. like
wow,
totally different.
You can't even believe it.
Bizarre, right?
Well, Morgan Freeman's died about 12 times
Oh
now.
my God. That's so funny. Right?
Like,
Yeah. That's hilarious. So thinking about all of those things and how those are going to impact, right? And I just think there's way bigger goalposts that we are perceived to need to hit nowadays, right? Before, providing a good home for your family, maintaining a steady job, security, and putting food on the table for your family.
That was purpose enough.
That was fulfillment.
Yep. It was great. And at the end of the day, once you've done all
now,
you could read your paper, have your cigar and your scotch and go to bed and be content.
Yeah. And go back to our enough is enough. And I know there was lots of things lacking in those days, right? Lots of things. But, now you look and it's like, okay, well, you need that. But you also, in my world here, something relevant, you also need the extra $40,000 to send your kid away to a hockey academy when they're fucking ridiculously young because they're not going to make the NHL. And then you also need a vacation home, but then you also need to pay for vacation. Plus you need to have passes for the ski hill, even though you won't be able to ski because your kids play hockey. And then, or whatever, right? Yeah. Obviously I have a certain experience of something that dominates my life, right? But those kinds of things, like that, the home and the food on the table isn't enough. And the car to get your family around. Now you just need so many other things.
There's a Vancouver Sun article.
And I use need loosely there, guys.
Very loosely. But it was a couple that made like more than $100,000 each that were broke. Yeah. But they had like a house with a nanny. Yeah. They each had 2 cars. They had a vacation home. They ate out every day. They the list went on and on.
Yeah,
it's
just
like, but
your life.
You don't need all that.
No.
Like, and it was a big house, so just live in a smaller one because it's just the 3 of you or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. And
they felt they needed all that.
Exactly. And we've talked about that, I think maybe in that enough is enough kind of thing, right? But all of those things are negatively impacting how much men feel like they can provide and hold the burden of, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
In many aspects.
Yeah, because you just can't.
And really the end result is that we become disconnected. Disconnect is the biggest downfall of all of these ailments, essentially, right? Is we become disconnected from ourselves and therefore disconnected from our loved ones.
Yeah, and that then
then disconnected from society, which lacks purpose, belonging, all of those things we've talked about in previous episodes.
And I think too, we could do a whole episode on this, but I mean, our society doesn't promote values anymore. And I think if you have your one of the best things I ever did was come up with my 10 core values because it really narrowed my focus and it changed my life. So that's something we could do an episode on down the road.
Totally.
It's just about finding your values.
Yeah, and something we're going to talk about is to some individuals, men in particular, talking about their own health journeys, and perhaps we can reflect on that. Like, how did what you valued before shift?
Because if you talk to most people who've stared death in the face, the things come really quickly into focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all come to a point of reflection and redirection, right?
Yeah.
Like, what actually matters. Yeah.
Yes. Heavy stuff.
Awesome.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mr. Bull-Hansen, for that video. That was fantastic.
Yes, and just to anybody who believes that they may need somebody to talk to, please feel free to reach out to us in the DMs and we will connect you as best we can. There are always local mental health centers and really strange places like that people are scared to walk into. So I'm not going to recommend that. And if you feel connected to us, start here and we'll help you navigate that, because I think that is one of the biggest barriers.
Yeah.
Most people like to go where they know. And that's what I have found, at least. And secondly, if you please everybody else, if you are looking around your life, look at a man who is holding it all and appears to have it all together, and check in on them.
Yeah.
And especially the ones that definitely don't look like they have it all together, check in on them.
Please do.
But even the ones that do, okay? And appreciate. Men are fueled by appreciation, and appreciate all that they do, even if they're carrying it really well.
Yes.
And that will help them carry it stronger.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that wraps up what we hope was your favorite episode of the Integrateness podcast.
Until next week.
Oh my God, you beat me to it. Thank you. Well done. I'm Jason.
I'm Jolene.
Take care out there.
I was trying to carry that for you, Jay.
No, you did a very good job.
Thanks.
You did a very good job. It just startled me.
Yeah.